present with us at Brookfield Central High School today and all the teams joining us virtually. Thank you for attending Hazmat's Qualifier Preparation Workshop. Okay. Hi, everyone. We're excited to invite you to Hazmat's workshop opportunity designed to help you prepare for your upcoming qualifiers and take your skills to the next level. This is your chance to learn from some of the best sessions. Sessions will be led by members of the Hazmat team and experienced FTC alumni from across Wisconsin, all eager to share their insights and expertise. We'll cover key topics to give you a competitive edge, including judging preparation, portfolio creation, and robot design. Our goal, to inspire, equip you with new knowledge, and boost your confidence going into competition. Let's make this session a great success together. Okay. Today's time schedule is going to look something like this. Our introduction is going to lead us into the first 15 minutes, talking about the alumni and how they're going to help us today. Then we're going to get into the judging preparation workshop, going from 10:15 to 10:45. Then we're going to go into the portfolio workshop from 10:45 to 11:15. And finally, the robot strategy workshop from 11:15 to 11:45. We're also going to be hosting in-person scrimmages for all the teams here today from 12 to 3. Lunch will be provided, and thank you for coming. Okay, time to meet the alumni present with us today. Starting off, we have Trent Ray, who is a 13201 Hazmat alumni. He's currently pursuing his engineering degree at Michigan Tech. Trent, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your time in first?
Yeah, so I was on Team Hazmat for 4 years and I did FLL for 2 years prior. I continue in the first community up here. I mentored two teams this fall here in Michigan. The season only goes in the fall, but that was a lot of fun mentoring two teams up here. And yeah, I have a lot of experience when it comes to the judging practice and mechanical side of things. So glad to have you here.
Thank you, Trent, for joining us today. Moving on, Aman is also here with us today. He's also an Hazmat alumni, and he's currently pursuing his mechanical degree at Georgia Tech. Aman, do you want to tell us a little bit about your time in first?
Yeah, everyone. My name's Aman. So I was involved mainly with the mechanical sub team of FTC, which I was involved in for 5 years, I think. But I also touched all aspects of first, including software and like business and stuff. Um, and yeah, I currently, like Trent said, I currently enjoy mentoring um Hazmat virtually. And I'm committed to a bunch of robotics uh clubs and projects here at school as well. Um, kind of just honing in on those skills I'd learned from first. So yeah.
Thank you, Aman, for being here today with us. Moving on, Adi Tiwari from Hazmat. He's also pursuing computer science at UWM. Adi's actually here with us in person today. Thank you, Adi.
I'm Adi, as you know. I've been doing first for 5 years now, 1 year FLL and 4 years of FTC at Hazmat. And I was more focused on the software side for first. So I'll be helping out with software like programming. Any questions on that?
Yeah. Thank you, Adi, for being here with us. Moving on, Pavan from Hazmat as well. Biomedical engineering in Madison. Pavan is also here with us in person today.
Hi everyone. My name is Pavan. I did 2 years of FLL before joining Team Hazmat for FTC. I did 4 years of high school with them. And obviously I'm a second year college student, so I've been helping them out for the last 2 years. I mainly worked on the game strategy. I drove the robot for all 4 years of high school. And yeah, I kind of worked with both mechanical and software to help make our robot the best like on the field. So that's primarily my expertise.
Thank you, Pavan, for also being with us today. Moving on, Kevin from Beast Robotics. He's a mechanical engineer and he's currently working at Pregus.
Hey, I'm Kevin. I've been involved with the first program since 2008 with our FRC team, Beast Robotics here in Brookfield. I went to college at MSOE. I got my degree in mechanical engineering, and currently I work at Pregus, which is kind of we do packaging automation. So I've been involved with First for a little over 16 years now. and don't regret a single second of it. So yeah, if you have any mechanical questions, I can help you guys with that. But
Kevin's actually a mentor for Team Hazmat, and he's been a really great resource for us, and he's also going to be a really great resource for you guys. Moving on, Varun, he's also a Hazmat alumni, and he's doing mechanical at Madison.
Hi, everyone. I've been involved with FIRST for a long time. I was in FLL for a year before FTC, and then I was on the game strategy and mathematical team with Pavan for 4 years on Hazmat. And I've been involved as a alumni mentor a little bit as for the past 2 years. And yeah.
Thank you, Varun, for being here. Abby Warren, she's also from Beast Robotics, and she's currently a mechanical engineer at Lockheed Martin.
Everyone, I'm Abby. So I was on Beast Robotics for 4 years in high school, and then I went to UW-Madison and got my mechanical engineering degree. Now I coach both FTC and FRC, and I'm a mechanical engineer for Lockheed Martin.
Abby has also been a really great resource as a mentor for other teams. Thank you for being with us today. Finally, Anushka, she's a 16310 alumni, roundabouts, and she's currently doing computer science at Purdue.
Hi, my name is Anushka. I've been on the FTC program for about 2 years. I also had the privilege of serving on the Wisconsin Student Board of Directors last year as their director of DE&I. I'm currently virtually mentoring a couple of FLL teams, and I mentor a couple FTC teams here at Purdue in Indiana.
Thank you, Anushka, for being here with us today. Thank you to all the alumni as well, in general, for being with us today and being a great resource to us. Okay, we're going to start off with the judging workshop, and we're going to go over these 4 key points as you see on your screen.
So the timeline for our judging workshop today is we're going to start with what is judging and a general overview, and then we're going to go over what you should talk about in judging. And oh, sorry, before we begin, I'm Isha. I am the business captain on Team 1321 Hazmat, and I've been in FTC for I think 4 years now. Yeah, so our judging session, we're going to go over what is judging, what you should talk about, and then how you should prepare. So we'll go over the different components of a judging session and the different things that you should have ready before you enter your judging room. And then we'll end with some tips and tricks. So starting on what is judging. So in FTC judging, it's a 15-minute session, which is the biggest part of your judging for awards, where judges will be able to see the work that you've done over the season. And it's structured with a 5-minute presentation that teams make themselves. And it's a concise presentation where you talk about your robot design, your engineering process, outreach efforts that you've had, and your journey and impact throughout the season. And that's where you want to share the lessons that you've learned and just everything that you've accomplished so far. And the remaining time of your session would be a Q&A. And so the judges can engage with your teams and ask about any questions that they might have on specific aspects of your robot or your business strategy. And it's to help them align your season with their award criteria. So the first thing that you should talk about in a judging session is you should start with your team overview. And so you want to start strong and have a lot of energy. So you can start with introducing all of your team members, the roles that they play, and team goals and traits that you might have. And you want to share your season objectives and your mission so that your judges know what your team is aiming for throughout the season and how far you've come. And the second part is robot design and innovation. So a good thing to show to start with is your design process. So you want to show how you started brainstorming and developing your robot, and then iterations you've made since then, and also the innovative and unique aspects. And you can also do a robot demo along with this. You can show the different parts of your robot, go up and really have the judges understand what you're talking about. And it's also a good time to talk about challenges and solutions that you've had for your challenges. And then you can talk about your programming and strategy. So you'd want to share your achievements and also your design process for your software and your game strategy. So your strategy on the field, how you maximize points, and the scoring opportunities and challenges that you have with your game strategy. And then You also want to highlight your outreach impact. So what the activities that you've had, maybe different projects or initiatives that you've built up. And if your team has done any collaborations and mentorship with other teams, that's also a really good thing to share. And you also want to just outline your overall impact and the impact that you've had on your STEM community, but then also non-STEM communities.
Everyone, my name is Nutana, and I'm just going to be discussing one thing that we should prepare for before our judging presentation and just our qualifier overall. So one big question is, how should we prepare for our judging process? And one thing you should know is you need to know your awards beforehand. You need to familiarize your team with your criteria for each award. So that means inspire, think, and innovate. Yeah. And just all the awards, you just need to know how these awards align with your accomplishments and your team. And then you just need to study your judge manual. Your game manuals is just, they give you guidance on what you need to do and what judges are looking for and what they're going to score you on. And you need to also plan out your presentation because you have a 5-minute limit. You need to have ample time for questions and answers. Next, you need to prepare for your materials. And one thing you need to have is obviously a judging script. So you need to prioritize and create a concise and impactful 5-minute script. And this is obviously the first thing that the judges will see. And so you have to make it very appealing and just be confident as well, because that's when you step in and you're going to showcase your team. Another thing is your engineering portfolio. You need to ensure that your portfolio is complete and concise and professional. You need to include diagrams, pictures, basically everything that you've done throughout the whole season. And then next, you have to have a robot demo. Obviously, if you have your robot in the room, the judges can see what your robot consists of, and it can just also help with questions whenever the judges ask anything about the robot. Another thing is just visual aids. Like I said, obviously the robot will help you answer questions about mechanical stuff or anything like that. So that's one way we can prepare for our judging process. To hand it off to Annalise. Okay, wait. It's about. Okay, there we go.
Hi everyone, my name's Annalise. I'm just going to be talking a little bit more about how you can prepare for judging. So one thing that you really need to make sure you have is a strong presentation. So a good way to organize your presentation is by having a team introduction, a part about your robot, a part about your programming and your game strategy, parts about your community outreach and impact, and then your lessons learned at the end to kind of sum up your whole team and experience. And you really want to make sure that you practice this presentation just to make sure that every team member knows like what they're going to say and when they're going to say it, stuff like that. And then you should also make sure you anticipate questions that the judges are going to ask. So usually if you search online, you can just search like FTC questions, and they have a bunch of PDFs of questions that teams have been asked in the past. And so you can practice, like you can have a coach read out the questions to you and you can think about how you could answer those. And then, sorry. And then also if you've been to a qualifier in the past and you've been judged, you can think about the questions that you were asked then and the questions that you had trouble answering. And you can try to come up with a response to say for that. So this is also a really good way to build confidence with your team, and you can work with other teams or your mentors to do these Q&As.
I just want to confirm, can all the teams here see the screen that's being shared?
Yes.
All right,
Yeah.
that's great. Well, I'm just gonna stop sharing and then reshare so all the teams can see it. All right.
Here's some quick tips and tricks. Here's some quick tips and tricks about your judging. You want to be concise and organized. You have 5 minutes in the judging room. Judges will let you go slightly over sometimes, or if you can, you want to try and stay under that time. You want to use this time wisely to present what your robot is, what you've done, what your outreach is, and what you've done throughout the season through software, business, and mechanical, and your game strat part. You want to keep it engaging and focused so that the judges don't get bored, or you also want to make it so that you can like center what you've done, so you can get all the stuff and like the important impact that you've made on the community out and what you've done for your robot. You want to engage during Q&A. You want to be honest, thoughtful, and enthusiastic when answering judges' questions. You don't want to have a monotone firm because, like, your judges are your friends. Don't be scared of them. You want to interact with them and you want to be able to like talk to them. So you want to be able to answer well and you want to be able to answer enthusiastically. So like you're not like a monotone, so you're not like looking like you're not interested in robotics. You want to look like you're happy and you're excited to be there to present to your judges. You should also use visual aids, use props, use your robot, your portfolio to illustrate points and captivate attention. We tend to use like a lot of posters where we present like what we have, what we've done. We have different posters for the business team, the mechanical and software team, where we show what we've done for those parts. So you can show like the judges a little more like a visual, or you can also make a judging presentation, which is like slideshow that goes with your script. So you can just generally like show what you've done as like in a visual form, rather than just only talking about what you're doing. You can also show the judges what you're doing because it makes it more like appealing to the judges. So.
All right. Thank you, Ryan, and the rest of the business team for talking about through the judging workshop. I just want to clearly emphasize that using visual aids is actually a really integral part of your judging presentation, as it can be what captures the judge's attention and keeps them focused on your presentation and give them a backup if they lose track of what you guys are saying. Okay, moving on. Do any of you guys have any questions on what we just gone over? Any of you teams in person? Yeah. Don't you go? You're unmuted right now.
Yeah. I know I want to go to more.
So we usually have like an extra computer that we can bring in on like a cart, and then we have to stream to the laptop.
Oh, okay, got it. Thanks.
I don't know if you can do it on Zoom.
Hi, we had a question from Spare Parts Robotics. We're wondering, how do you handle when you have a lot of team members on your team and you're doing a presentation? How do you include everyone? Or maybe you don't.
Yeah, so that's a good question because we actually usually have like a 15-member team for judging usually. I think the best way to handle it is having every single person try to speak for a little bit. It's easier on the whole team because then everyone has to remember less, and then it also people are able to speak exactly about what they did. So I think we kind of just fit like maybe 3 to 4 sentences per person and try to get as much in one paragraph as possible. But yeah.
Maybe just add the course within Hazmat. One of the things that this program is about learning. And one of the biggest opportunity is to learn how to present. So it's actually a wonderful situation that the teams get like 1 to 2 minutes or maybe less than a minute to come on stage and talk with all the friends around. It's a great way to get introduced into presenting in front of judges, panels, etc. So don't mess it up and don't. As coaches, my recommendation and what the judges instead is also say that don't deny the person the opportunity. Allow everybody to get on and speak. Okay.
Thank you, Coach Amjad. Does anybody have any more questions?
Yes, actually, I do have a question. I'm from Cybershark's team. So the question is, if we're working on a project for a certain award, when we're talking to the judges, do we start by saying we're working on this project for that award, or do we just say the project without mentioning the award we're trying to get?
Yeah, so I think you definitely don't have to mention the word or like the award that you are speaking for. Judges will definitely know the categories that fall within each award. So as long as you look directly at the judges rubric and you know what award you're trying to achieve, the judges will automatically know that too. So,
But it is a good idea to group your information while you're presenting so that each section of information you're presenting is related to one award.
Yeah.
Also, you can sorry, Trent. You can tie in the award name to the specific project in your portfolio. If you do want like a certain thing to be associated with like the Motivate Award or like the Control Award.
All right. We have some questions in the chat here. First one is how many members do you recommend to participate on the interview? I would say as many as you can. Like ideally everyone. Um, Again, you can chop up that presentation into little bits so everyone has to remember less. And when it comes to that presentation, I don't think it's about remembering the exact wording. It's just come up with key details. Make an exact wording for consistency, but um you can definitely it's okay to let go a little off script as long as you know what the key points you're missing, and if the wording isn't exactly there, that's fine. But yeah, as many people as you can. Second question, how do we split the time between categories? Like should one category have more time than others? Generally, you want to stay within the category, so I would organize it. Start with an introduction, say this is who we are, and then here's a couple of our goals for the season, and then explain how you went through these goals using examples from the other categories, if that makes sense. Like, go on to your business, and then your mechanical, then your software. And which one you say first and last is a matter of which one you think is your strong suit. You want to start high and end high. So you want to put your best first and last, whichever one you want to feel strongest about. And honestly, the time split between sections is uh, based on how much content you have. Like if you did a lot more work on the robot than outreach, talk more about the robot. If you did a lot of outreach, make sure that that gets a lot of time in your judging session because you definitely don't want the judges to miss anything you've done.
Yeah, thank you,
There,
Trent.
there was another question in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I think the question says, what are the best visual aids you can use during judging portion aside from the robot? Most qualifiers in New York City are limited to mostly tangible things, and you can't present slides during judging. If you can't present slides during judging, this is what our team did. We kind of took poster boards that we kind of printed out beforehand, and what our team did is, kind of split it down categories, more software, mechanical, and then the business side, and that allows you to also show pictures from actual events you've done, outcomes of the events, and like stats and everything. Definitely putting not a lot of stats, but a good balance of stats, visuals, and keywords definitely helps you present, but also the judges to visually see it and correlate with what you're presenting. So I would definitely do that. And then as they're splitting categories, like Trent said, just look and focus what you want to emphasize more on. And kind of at the end, make sure you're wrapping up with, one or two sentences of overall how your season went. So yeah.
I think building off of what she just mentioned, if you can't really bring in slides or say posters because you have to bring in only like physical things, bring in like prototypes, right? For the mechanical portion, it's judges want to see iterations. They want to see that you had a design, you failed with that design, and you improved it. And so bring like what we did last year. One of the portions of our robot went through like over 15 iterations or so. So we brought all the printed and iterated parts in a plastic bag and kind of just showed that when we kind of talked about that in judging. And this doesn't even apply for the mechanical team, right? You can also take this to the like business and outreach side. If you can't present the info in a poster, slides, bring in like giveaways or items that were specific to that event, right? Maybe like flyers from the event, or like different like giveaways, right? Just something to show your connection to that outreach will make it more personable for the judges to remember that, oh, you actually enjoyed this and you gained from that experience.
Yeah, so we actually have our team members here with our judging posters that we use. So this is an example of what Hazmat uses as visual aids for emphasis on what we're talking about. Do you guys want to talk a little about what you're holding?
So for instance, in here, we just have big pictures of the CAD. We have, big words, big letters. We just want to emphasize that this is visual, right? So this is meant to kind of show the judges, pretty easily, pretty quickly, like the high level things of what you want to, put across in there. And just kind of give them a feel for, your team. Put your personality in here, and really make it your own. So for here, we have our software. This is our software poster. So you can see we have design. This covers we have mechanical entity that we have iterations of our climber from Huffington's, as well as our sideboards. We do sprints. So depending on these different skills, we can continue to define problems and then we create solutions based on them. And then we iterate and continue to improve based on feedback that we get from drivers, from other teams, from teammates, etc. And this continues for the entire season, especially between qualifiers. And so we continue to add on.
And that's a really big thing judges want to see when you're in your presentation, right? They want to see that you guys have found a failure point in your robot, you've changed it, and you've replaced it with something you believe to be a better and more successful part of it. For example, if you feel like your intake claw isn't as precise as you can get it to be, you can change it, iterate it throughout the season, make it better, and show that you guys have changed. Use an analysis to determine that this claw is better than this claw in these situations, and you guys have switched to a new claw. That's a really good thing judges want to see.
Just like pictures, and then we so like summarize the event and like do off the like the numbers of the impact and like what the goal of that so now which event was. And then other thing about your postings that you can add a lot of colors, you can draw the judges attention to the things that are most important. And we also like to categorize our outreach into different initiatives just to make it easier for
Thank you, Misha. And a really big point that you want to get across in judging is that your entire team is there because your entire team has worked on every part of your team to be successful. You want your entire team to be there because each of you can talk about the different stuff you've done during the season. That can help you grow as a team and demonstrate that your team's ready to win the award that you want to win. Okay, does anybody have any more questions?
One more
Yeah.
thing with those posters. You can use those in your pit as well. So that can be extra pit decoration and take it into your judging. That way you get more impact out of it.
Actually, what if you just make a presentation on your laptop and take your laptop with you to the judges meeting? Would that also be a thing?
We've done that in the past. Yep. We've done that in the past. That works pretty well, but it really helps to have physical items to show the judges, like the robot, like examples of giveaways from events.
But yeah, that's a great baseline to have. That sets you apart from most teams already. If you do bring in a presentation or slideshow on your computer to the meeting, if you're able, or the judging presentation, if you're able to.
Just adding on to that, I think as going in with like a laptop, that's a great idea. But all you got to keep in mind is make sure that the judges can actually see what you're presenting. Because if you stand too far from the judges, they might not be able to see the screen. So just making sure that, it's visible to the judges and they're able to understand the words and the images clearly, and you're correlating your presentation with the actual visual aids, then it'll be a great start.
Yeah, in Hazmat's judging, actually, we do bring a laptop and we plug it into a monitor. That way, we have a simplified version of what we're talking about in our script up and ready on a monitor screen through a simple Google slideshow. In that Google slideshow, what we include is basically what we're talking about in visual aids so that the judges can look back if they feel confused or lost, or they want extra information on something. We use a big monitor so that the judges can actually see what's going on.
Any more questions? Yeah.
For the interviews, how would you integrate new members who have only been with the team for a couple of months?
So that question was for interviews, how would you integrate new members that have only been on the team for a couple of weeks?
So in the past, when we've had shadow members or brand new members, we kind of just let them talk about their brand new experience, what they've learned. It doesn't necessarily have to be what they contributed. It could just be what they found valuable to themselves and how they hope to contribute in the future.
They themselves are kind of an example of what their team is doing for outreach. So it's like a good anecdote to talk about, like, oh, this person helped me. I'm new to the team. This person helped me in this sub team, and I learned this in the last couple of weeks, and I'm having a great time doing this. Something like that.
Yeah, and it actually shows sustainability in your team. If you bring new members to your presentation and have them talk about the stuff that they've learned already as they've joined the new team, this shows that your team is growing and trying to be sustainable by getting new members or attracting people who are younger to come and join the team. That shows that your team wants to be sustainable and keep going.
There was a question in the chat. Do you recommend giving some elements like pins, pens, etc. of your team in the interview or in your pitch? What we've usually done is given it before we start our like script or presentation. And I would say give it during not during your pitch so that you don't spend too much time in like that whole handing out process. They will gladly take anything no matter when during the whole interview, before or after. Sometimes there are rules about how whether they can even take it at all, but definitely offer to give them giveaways, whether it be pins or sometimes what we did at Worlds once was give hats with our like logo on them. And we did that during the questioning um, part of the like the interview. And you can also have these at your pit as well, if you can't get them out during the judging session.
And that's actually a presentation skill that you could use everywhere in your life, right? In something as simple as like a DECA competition, handing a business card to a judge so that they remember your presentation over others is what separates you from the rest of the competition. You want to make sure that the judges remember your presentation specifically, what made you guys unique, and giving them something as simple as like a cap that you guys have or team wear or a simple business card with all the information you want to give to the judges is a really great thing to have. All right. Any final questions on the topic? All right. Looks like we're good to move on. So we're going to move on to the portfolio workshop, and we're going to talk a little bit more on the specifics on what you guys want to include in your portfolio. This is important because this is what the judge is going to look at to give you awards and meet criteria for awards. So the four main points we're going to talk about is the criteria for each award. What are the needs and requirements you guys should like show and demonstrate to win each award or be considered for each award? We're going to talk about what is the portfolio. Now, this might seem kind of simple, but it's really important to remember what you guys are trying to get across in a portfolio. Your portfolio is basically a visual way of your team. It's showing what your team has done throughout the season and past seasons, and it's showing who your team is. We're also going to go over what the portfolio should include. So we have a template that we're going to bring up later, and you guys can go over and look at what are each of the slides you guys want to include in your portfolios. What are the main things you want to include in your portfolio, basically? And we're going to go over tips and tricks we have learned over the past years. The alumni gain experience on this that we use in our portfolio.
Hi, I'm Rohit. I'm HR of our team. I'm also the guy who is probably annoying you on Instagram. Sorry if I did that, but I'm gonna go over some award criteria here. So I'm gonna start over on design award. So usually on your design award, it's not about like a single component, but it's about your whole robot in general. You want to have an elegant, efficient, and like a practical robot design. So something that's really cool, but it might be unpractical and just takes a long time, might not fit into this category. So you want to also think of that. At Hazmat, we also like to think of our robots as very elegant, and that's one of the things we prioritize. So another one is control award. And this is where your portfolio shows your hardware and software control. And it's all their functions in software and hardware. You have a consistent robot functionality with external feedback like telemetry or anything like that. And it's a reliable, and you can see all the lessons you've learned in your control solutions. But next we also have innovate. Innovate's going to be your innovator award. Your system that shows the uniqueness of your robot. So it's creative, it's unique, it's stable, robust, it's effective. A very key point. And its risk is mitigation for creative design. You also have your motivate award. So that's going to be organizational plans, goals, finances, timeline, outreach. And these are individual contributions from each team member, not just one. Recruit new team members and engage with STEM and community, like how they were talking about how they have newer team members. This also plays into your Motivate Award. Connect Award. So this is for team goals, member skills, and development steps. So having in-person virtual connections with engineering communities, going to companies, talking to other teams, that's going to be Connect Award. Think Award. So this is your portfolio has the engineering process, lessons, trade-offs, and a design analysis. You're going to have a clear organizational skills. And then you're going to have details on your mentors and team growth. Finally, Inspire, the one we all want. So this is going to be, you have a high quality portfolio. You have engineering content, team info, plan. You have a strong contender for machine, team, and think award. So all your other awards have checked the boxes, and you have a positive and inclusive team, and all of them contribute to success. So an engineering portfolio. So the engineering portfolio is a concise 15-page document. It also has a title page that summarizes the team's engineering journey throughout the season, highlighting key aspects of the team's design through building and programming processes. It serves as a primary documentation for judges during the competition. The engineering portfolio also provides a focused overview to engage judges and showcase the team's accomplishments. This year, the engineering portfolio isn't a requirement now, but yeah, engineering notebook. This is engineering portfolio. My bad. But yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so this part of this session is about the engineering portfolio, which is required
Yeah.
in your judging. The engineering notebook is not required this year, but it is a document that you can make to like overview all the in-depth details about your season. So your portfolio should start with your team information. So you want to summarize who your team is and the goals and the mission that you have and the focus for your season. And this is a good start of your portfolio because it really aligns everything that you've done throughout the season with your overarching goal. And you also want to have your team members, so we do like little bios or pictures, and you can have their roles and their contributions of the season and also their goals for the season because it's good to highlight individual goals as well as your overall team goals. And so when you start on your mechanical section, a good thing to start with is your engineering design process. And so you can have a different engineering design process, but it typically goes with your identification of like the problem, which goes along with like the season game, and then the development of like brainstorming and problem solving to find your solutions and prototype, and then you have like your final solutions and the iterations. And so the iterations are also a very important thing to highlight in your portfolio. So you want to have these different parts of the engineering design process laid out, and a good thing to have is examples, so pictures of your robot. And if you have like CAD, those type of things are also good things to put in your portfolio. And that goes along with the robot design. So you want to have your details on materials, the mechanisms, and the features. And then you also want to include your programming, which is like your algorithms, your code, and the challenges that you solved. And it's always good to have visual aids in there. So pictures of your code, of parts of your robot, just to give the judges like an idea of the actual application of the things that you're saying.
You should also include your game strategy. So you should explain like how your robot was designed to address certain game challenges. So if your robot does a specific thing because of a certain game element, stuff like that, and how your strategy changes throughout the season. So as your robot goes through iterations, your strategy might change, and you really want to talk about that. You should also have your team outreach and impact in your portfolio. So your community outreach, you should always talk about your most important events, your partnerships, and then how your team is promoting STEAM and FIRST. You should also talk about collaboration. So if you're having meetings with other teams, if you're going on Instagram and like talking to other teams, all that stuff. And then your sustainability. So how you're getting new members and how you're growing your team knowledge. That's always really important. And then your final thing should be your reflection. So you should talk about all the lessons that you learned throughout the season and how your team has grown. So if you have individual goals, you can talk about how each individual person has grown through lessons and stuff. And yeah. Okay, so now we're going to just talk about what we need to include on our business portfolio. So obviously the first page is always just what you're going to show the judges. Like that should be like the most appealing, and that's just the first page you're going to show everyone, right? Or show your judges, right? So obviously you're going to display your team name and your team number and your logo and make it look nice and make it look really appealing because, you know, you're going to show these to your judges and have a fun team photo. Not super fun, but just like a big like not silly one. That's not what I meant. I meant like just a normal professional photo. And then we have our team have a team brand logo or just fun colors, like I said before, and table of contents on your portfolio.
And one important thing to highlight about the title page is that if you look in the game manual, it says the things that you can and cannot have on the title page, because while the portfolio is a 15 like page document, you can have an additional title page as long as it doesn't have like actual like details from your season. So you can have like the pictures and like the table of contents, but look at that for the more specific requirements.
Yeah. And then the second page is just a team overview. So basically just a little summary of your team and your core values. And what we do in our portfolio is we just include everyone's team goals and our personal goals as well. And obviously our last point right there, we individual and team goals. So we have team pictures and we just write each goal that we have for our season. You guys can continue with the connected word.
Yeah, so on our like after you talk about like your team goals, and you can really put like your outreach and your awards anywhere in the portfolio, but so for the Connect Award, you want to highlight your community involvement with STEM communities and initiatives that are connecting with other FIRST teams or companies. And you want to talk about how your team works with other teams, mentors, and sponsors, and also how you can share knowledge with teams around the world through like workshops, presentations, or online content. And another good thing for Connect is your social media. So if you have an Instagram, a Twitter, or any other like social media platforms, so it's good to highlight how you use that to engage with other teams. And also that's another thing that falls under Connect is your mentoring. So if you work with any FLL teams or any other like clubs, it's a good thing to show like your mentoring of other like STEM related clubs. And then overall, you want to highlight your impact. So you list out all these different activities, but you have to say how that helped teams, how that helped develop your like relationships with sponsors or mentors, and how that helped to progress your own individual and season goals. And so that goes along with the second page with your bios. When you have your individual goals on there, you want to have like a development plan. So you're stating a goal and also how you get there. And the Connect Award is kind of like the bridge between like your goals and then your actual skill development.
For your Motivate Award section, you also want to share your team's goals. So if your team has a goal of spreading first through your community, that would be a good thing to mention. And then your financial plan. So how you gain funds, how you make sure that the funds will last you throughout the season, and then your risk management plan and your timeline. So if you started at the beginning of the season, say you started in the summer and you were doing a bunch of outreach events over the summer, but now you're attending a qualifier in January. So you want to make sure that you really cover how your team has progressed throughout the year, and then your outreach strategy. So if you have any specific strategies for how you plan your outreach. You also want to talk about how each team member has contributed. So if all of your team members go to every single outreach, that's a good thing to mention. And then how you're a first ambassador. So how you recruit and encourage new participants in STEM, whether this is like demoing at schools or participating in local events like Maker Faire in Milwaukee. And then you also want to show how you've used lessons from past outreach to improve for future events. So if at one event you didn't have any handouts or anything, or any brochures about your team, and you noticed that a lot of people, like you had to talk to a lot of people because they were confused, maybe you could implement that in your next section in your next outreach event to show, oh yeah, we learned this and this is how we've improved it. And then you should also make sure that you have innovative materials or methods. So whether this is like pins or bracelets or coloring books that you can give out to your community just to show and engage them in first. So these are just some examples of business portfolio design. So on this one, they have all of their team members around the corner like this. In this one, they have a whole team picture. And this one, they also have a whole team picture. And they all show, like this one has color coding to show which sub-team each of the team members are on. This team uses a cool web. And this team lists every single team member. So this is just some examples. You can always find examples of portfolios all across the world if you just search them up on Google. So you can really take inspiration from these world-winning portfolios. And these are just different ways that they organize. So this team has goals throughout their season. This team uses like more of a paragraph format. So yeah.
And then another example. So this is kind of highlighting like your season timeline and like your about us kind of section. And so both of these teams highlight their like mission and their values. And so this is a good thing to put at the beginning of your portfolio, like we said, to show like the alignment throughout like the rest of your season and everything that you've done within your different sub teams. And so it's also really good to include like a season timeline or at least like dates that like show how your team has progressed and like when you did stuff. And so like Annalie said, you can, if you look these up, you can find so many different portfolios and you could take inspiration from these because they're all really good examples.
Before you guys move on to the the mechanical portfolio, just wanted to reiterate something. There's a question in the chat: is the business portfolio the same as the engineering portfolio? The way that they were talking about, they're talking about like the business portfolio and mechanical portfolio. Just to reiterate, it's just part of the engineering portfolio, which is 15 pages in total. And what they just talked about is just the business portion of that portfolio.
Yeah, so when you're making your portfolio, you want to separate you would want to separate it into like your different sub teams, or you can really group it however you want. It's just very clear when you do it, like a section for business, a section for mechanical, and game strategy and programming, and have like all the pages for that group together. And yeah, so this is just overviewing what you would include in the business section of your portfolio. And then moving on to mechanical.
Hey, so my name is Ethan. I'm gonna be talking about the mechanical section of the portfolio. So some important information is like the most important thing is like what does your robot do? Because that's like what the judges want to know. Like, and you should split it up into like each subsystem, like what is unique about it. Like it could be as simple as like our robot is like focuses on like samples to bucket and like what does it do? Again, like could be your intake picks it up, transfers to outtake, places in the high basket, or you could say like it does specimen, work in parallel. And also unique, like you want to find something that's like innovative about your robot. Like one thing that separates yourself from others, like our intake has a triple articulating arm, like that's something that's unique. And then what kind of math did you use to develop your system? So example could be like using core calculations to find the optimal motor for climb. Like we went through iterations on how to find like the optimal torque calculations and like speed of motors and like size of pulleys. Like that's a good example of like math to find the climb that you need. And some iterations are like next are iterations, which is like what changes has your subsystem gone through. Like a good example could be like your intake. So we had like 4 iterations of intake where there's like rollers. So we started with like a go build it parts, and then we went all the way to 3D printed, and we actually had those like in physical form so we could show it to judges. And then next thing could be like what caused you to make these changes to your subsystem? Like, so you could say, how did your iterations like improve your robot overall? Like you could say like cycle times, like intake, it was a lot more accurate than like the roller, so that's why we switched to a claw. And then an example of like what changes did you make was like we changed the length of our intake arm for more accurate pickup, so the cycle time is also like increased. That's a good idea to include. And we also made like an iteration board, which you don't have here, but like it includes like the first iteration to the top. So we start off with, you could say like we start off with like a big housing, and it like was not the most like useful for drivers and like not, it's too heavy. And then we went to like this more accurate like B-guide claw that is a lot, it helps you like pick up more samples and more cycle time. And you should include this on your robot and like probably split up your outtake, intake, and like climber into like separate pages if that's like, you have to find the right design that works for your portfolio, and then you have to explain like how are they like improved from qualifiers like Frozen Frenzy and then the other qualifiers. And then yeah, that's it for iterations. Design process, you should say like what processes do you like use? Like how does it organize your like organize your team, and like how do you follow this process? Like what stages are you at? You could say like we went from this stage, and then you could say we went back to this stage to iterate designs, and then how have you followed it? That's like how did you progress through the stages, and like how did you go back or go forward? What do you do between qualifiers? That's like a good thing to do. Again, with the iterations, like iterations are like a big thing between qualifiers, because usually a good thing to do is like change your iterations. Like say our claw improve from like a smaller V guide, or we include like a set screw hole. Like that's a good thing to include to bring the iteration board. Yeah, you can talk.
So on the other account with the camera on, we have a team member showing our iteration board that we use. If you guys can go ahead and pin that current for a little bit. Caleb, you can talk a little bit about our iteration board.
The clock, so we could do both best and sample transfer. Then for our intake, we started first with this claw, which we realized was too bulky, so we condensed it down. And then we realized that we could add a guide to help with our drivers and get a faster pick from the submersible. And then in this design, we finished everything, made the claws longer, and made it ready for a turn.
Yeah, so that's just a final look at how we use our board to exclaim that we use iterations constantly because we want to constantly be improving our robot. That's a really big thing you want to end up showing. Right. Uh, we're gonna go over now a couple example portfolio designs. Ethan, you want to talk a little bit how
Sure.
they integrate the stuff that we just talked about?
So this is a good example of like iterations. So you can see like how they used like a basic chassis, and then they improved from like V2 to V3. Like that shows like a good progression of like how your team improved throughout like the season. And then they also showed like some vertical like odometry pods, like what parts they used. Like that's a good aspect to include. And then like again with the iterations, that's a good thing to show. And then you show like what intakes to use. Like that's also a good thing, like wheel intake, claw intake, and then more iterations, and then important design decisions.
Thank you, Ethan, for talking about the mechanical stuff. Okay, I just want to take a quick second and apologize because I didn't introduce myself properly. My name is Vinayak. I'm part of Team Hazmat, as you guys might already know.
I've been on Hazmat for 3 years now, and I'm the software captain. So, a couple of things you want to talk about in your programming section of your portfolio. You want to talk about key algorithms first. This includes what what algorithms do you use in your code that makes you unique? Now, an example of this might include something like a driver aid that helps speed up your robot when your driver wants it to. We use something called bicubic dynamic acceleration. That's a really long word, but simply put, it's something where you press a trigger on the gamepad control, and the more you press it, the faster your robot goes. It's actually a simple implementation that FCC has as like a pre-library. If any of you guys have any questions on how to integrate that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us after the event for the in-person teams here. The Control Award wants a team that demonstrates what makes them unique in terms of what algorithms and code do they use that are structured, complex, and help their robot become better, right? Something like bicubic dynamic acceleration that speeds up your robot the more you press a trigger. So if the drivers want it to go slow, they can let go of the trigger. If they want it to go fast in a certain section, they can press down the trigger and the robot's going to move a little bit faster. Another thing is a transfer sequence. You might want to show exactly what in your code allows for your robot to transfer in a really good time. This might include minimizing breaks when you get the sample from intaking it to the bucket, right? You want to minimize the amount of time that happens. We call that cycles. You want to lower that amount of time so you can score more samples or score more specimens. Another thing you want to include is we use OpenCV for automated intake extension. And that is another complex thing that we do. We use OpenCV, which is a library provided that comes with FTC, and we use the camera detection using just a simple Logitech camera for detecting a sample block in a submersible and automatically extending our intake based off of that. Second thing you want to include is code highlights. Kind of going back to this, you have key algorithms. You also want to include what in your code makes it special. Now, this might include, do you have any unique concepts, any ideas that you use in your code, any structures that you use in your code that make it unique, well spread out, and well thought out? Do you use any sensors in your robot? How do you use those sensors? For example, in our robot, we have a color sensor on our intake. Now, the use of this is to let us know that we have actually picked up a sample. We don't want to end up accidentally clicking the button that allows us to transfer because it's going to lower our cycle time because it's going to give us an error, right? We're going to have to wait for the robot to do all of its actions by transferring the intake to the outtake, go drop that. We don't want that to happen. So what we do instead is we first check using logic, simple logic. Has our color sensor detected a sample inside of our intake claw? If it has, yeah, go ahead and transfer it. If it hasn't, wait a little bit, and then until it actually detects a sample is only when you can transfer it. Kind of talked about this. Color sensors, you can use that for tracking as well. You can also implement a color sensor in your outtake. Our robot has a separate intake and outtake. You can use a color sensor to determine where the sample is in your robot so you don't accidentally end up doing an action that you don't want to. Finally, you want to go over your coding process. Now, this is one of the big parts you want to talk about in your portfolio. This is another thing that you can show, as Mechanical said, iterations, right? You want to talk about how you start off the season by setting up your initial code. Then you want to talk about how you have sprints or how you guys build your code throughout the season. We follow the agile software development process, which is just 3 simple cycles. Plan out the code at the start, test it through qualifiers and competitions, and then iterate it. Simply put, if you find any errors in your code or something you can make better, for example, your transfer time, right? If you find that your robot waits a lot when it can actually end up doing something that can help you get more samples, you want to minimize that, right? You want to, at the end of the day, you want to score the most points that you want to. So stuff like using the agile software process, you can show how your team continuously iterates through your code and makes it better all the time. As shown here, you want to talk about how you structure your code, right? That's another way that you can demonstrate that you're following a defined process and your team is continuously improving from it. So, an example, these are 2 examples of a programming portfolio design that you want to include. Rod's going to talk a little bit about what is present inside of each of them.
So all of these are they're the same. So you can see it's 2 pages and there's a lot of info, but it's clear and it's actually very concise. And it's easy to follow for the judges. And you can see some like key algorithms they use for the robot, like PIDF for their arm control. And there's unique concepts such as like their state machine, auto aids, also showing different flow charts or even the map of their auto helps show a picture because pictures are going to show more than words. So that's definitely what you want to show, a lot of pictures, and that'll definitely help you. Definitely help it show to your judges and appeal to them.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I've been working with the graphic design elements of the team. This is a template that we've created for you. You can take a moment to scan the QR code. Uh, it's essentially a resource that you guys can use to help you create your own engineering portfolio, and it gives a basic overview of everything that you will be needing for each slide. I'll wait a moment for the people here to get the QR code. We'll be sending it out for you guys later, but it's essentially got spots that you can put pictures, and it goes over what you can put where, such as business goals, and it gives you a format for everything that you can potentially include in your portfolio. And you can also customize it yourselves when you use it to be able to be matching your team colors and reorganizing all of this stuff.
Yeah, so this is actually a great template that we Sorry about that. So this template is really great for teams that want to get into building their portfolio well. Kind of like we talked about, it has a lot of spaces for leaving pictures in. Again, you want to capture the judge's attention by putting in visual aids, right? Putting a bunch of text, a lot of little tiny little text is not going to be, first of all, they're not going to want to see it, right? It's kind of boring to look at a bunch of text versus a bunch of images. You want to first capture their attention and then they're going to be interested. They're going to get hooked on. They're going to look at what other information can I find. That is where you can put space for text or other images too.
Could you send the template link in the chat?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
I can do that. You can keep presenting. Oh, okay.
Right. So sorry, there's just another QR code if you guys want it. I'm gonna put it in the chat too. Yeah, we will be sending out this entire presentation, so you can also access the link later on. Moving on. Getting back, so these are the little tips and tricks that we use at Hazmat for building our portfolio. Like we talked about, these have benefited us a lot from the years. We've learned these from experience. Our alumni have been great by passing it down to us so that we've been able to integrate them into our portfolio. The three main the three main ideas that you want to remember when you're building your portfolio, simply put, visuals, right? We've kind of stressed that a lot throughout this presentation, but it's a really important and big part of your portfolio. Kind of like I said, if you don't get your judges' attention, if you want the judges to be hooked onto your presentation, you want them to think, oh, this is something I want to look at. I don't want to go through small, tiny little text. It's going to be really annoying to kind of look through all the text, right? If you give them a simple image of what's going on inside of your portfolio, that's a really great way to demonstrate all the information you want while keeping the judges' attention, right? So simple stuff like diagrams, sketches, simple photos of your team and the robot, CAD designs of your model of your robot. Those are all things you want to include inside of your portfolio. And those things will definitely help you succeed. Organization, that's another big part, right? Again, visually appealing. Other than just visuals, how are you going to plan out your portfolio so that it tracks the judges? It keeps them on track, keeps them hooked, keeps them wanting to look through your portfolio and understand everything. At the end of the day, your portfolio should be able to allow your judges to learn every single little detail about your team, understand what makes your team successful, and why you guys are going to win. Going back, if you guys are including an engineering notebook where you guys are gonna kind of talk about in much more detailed overview every single aspect of your team that's done. So the way we structure it is programming, business, and game strategy, and mechanical notebook. Those those really end up being around 200 pages. That kind of sounds a lot, but it's really important because in there you can kind of put everything into text, visuals, and pictures, and let the judges know through that they can build your robot. Actually, the way we kind of build our mechanical notebook is so that if the judges look through it, go through every single detail, they can understand a robot full breakdown. And that's kind of what you want to do in your portfolio. You want to align it with your notebook, not be as detailed, but include all the information you want to include. Okay, so moving on. You have any questions on what we just gone over?
Yep. I have one from the chat. It said, how long do the judges have to look at the portfolio? And the thing with that is it really depends on the competition. Typically, you will show up to the competition some of the day before. I'm not sure if they do that in Wisconsin yet, but you'll show up in the morning, right? You'll give it to the judge, to the check-in people, who will then pass it along to the judges. They might look at it a little bit before you present, but you go and you present, and then after you present, they keep looking through it throughout the day. But it's not going to be like 2 hours per team because that would not be feasible. So you have to make it as clear and concise as possible, as many visual aids as you can get, and because the judges really don't have a ton of time to read it, so you have to make very intentional decisions. You have to make very clear what you need to get your point across. So it's not a lot of time, typically. So that's why clarity and conciseness is so important.
You try. Are there any other questions from anybody of what we just gone over? I know we kind of talked about a lot. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, can you repeat that a little bit?
So that's just like your overall, like your organization of the portfolio, like we were talking about, like beginning with like your team goals. And then the way we do our portfolio, we go into business and then mechanical and then programming and game strategy. But they're kind of getting at that. So like how you organize your portfolio. And so you can really do it however you want, but do it in a way that like aligns with like the goals and the like the overall like summary that you provide at the beginning. You want to have your like the pages kind of align with that. So when a judge is like going through your portfolio, if they start at the beginning and like go through, you want it to be kind of like a like story all the way through. So that like if you start with a page that like they need like context for, like it's not like they're reading a page and they don't know where it fits. So it could be kind of like that. Like if you could like yourself go through the portfolio and like read it like page by page and see like if this like timeline of it kind of makes sense. And so yeah, you can experiment like moving around like the different sections you have and just seeing where it makes most like sense. And also getting like external feedback on that could be good. So people who've never seen your portfolio before just like give you feedback on your like organization.
Yeah, and that question was on the points for organization in the judging rubric.
Roka has a point he'd like to make.
Okay, so talking about pictures, I just wanted to show like, okay, my bad. We just wanted to show this. Like when you're reading a picture book, you'd rather read a picture book, right? Because it kind of engages you. And that's what you got to think as if you're a judge's standpoint. Picture book's gonna be like imagine they're reading a picture book it's definitely something that you want to read. You skip over the words and you kind of want to just look at the pictures.
Exactly, right? Who wants to read a whole 400-page only word book unless it's like Harry Potter or something, right? Unless you want to get interacted with, unless you want to get hooked onto the book, using visuals is the easiest way to do that. And that's a really great way that you can improve your portfolio immediately. Thank you, Rowan.
Questions?
Does anybody in the Zoom meeting have any questions? All right, looks like we're all good to move on.
But I think like there's two things I would say. One is that the judges are nice enough to give you a rubric, and they're mainly going off of what the rubric is. So you basically have the opportunity to include every single detail that they're looking for. You get to like they're only judging you off the rubric, so you know in each award, like you can hit every award and you know that's possible. So I would really dive deep into the judging manual and the rubric and make sure you're covering all of those things. And that's a good thing to do before you start making your portfolio. And then at the end, when you think you're finalized, you want to double check if you're hitting everything, go back to that rubric. I think it's a really good idea. And then another thing is when you're setting your goals, that kind of is how you're going to tell your story, right? So if you start with your goals being a little bit misaligned to what you did throughout the season, it might not sound as good as when you're starting the season, you make a couple goals and then you go through your whole season and you end with your goals, right? So make sure you craft the goals that you want at either at the start of the season or even right now. Make sure you craft them with purpose that resembles your team in a well-organized manner. So think about that.
There was a question in the chat. What can you do if the judge does not go to the next page? Judges do have to go through the whole portfolio, so they will read through all the pages. And if you explicitly kind of say, we're referring to something on page like 4 in your like judging interview, they will go to that page out of not just courtesy, but also they're kind of like required to, right? So you wouldn't really have to worry about that.
Yeah. The judges have to read every page up to the 15th. If you accidentally submit 20 pages, they will straight up ignore the last 5. So that is they cannot read past 15 in a cover. With that being said, I would align your judging presentation to the portfolio so they can kind of flip through the portfolio and it sort of aligns with what you're saying. So that way it's sort of encouraging them to look through the entire portfolio because they don't have to jump around. It's nice and easy just to go page by page.
Continuing off what Trent just said, you also got to make sure like the idea of a engineering portfolio is essentially a condensed version of your notebook. That's usually where the judges are stemming their questions from. So they're usually going through that portfolio to see what they can ask questions and how much you're correlating your presentation to the portfolio.
Mm-hmm. And the trick is the judges cannot use any information you do not tell them. So if they know something about your team, but you didn't say it either in your presentation or your portfolio, they cannot use it. So they will sometimes ask questions like, hey, what about this event to get you to say that? So what does that mean? So if you don't say it, so if a judge went to an event that you went to, but then you don't bring up that event, they cannot use that when considering you for awards unless you say it out loud or in your portfolio. But I would say if you haven't something so major, you should say it out loud either in pit or in the interview judging. So make sure to say everything you need to say and write that down in your portfolio so that way the judges can actually use that when it comes time to decide awards.
I had a question actually. So, I was watching the template. Does it have to be in horizontal way or it can be like vertical?
The orientation of your portfolio doesn't matter. There are teams that do either way. Your kind of goal with it is just to make sure that you're conveying your goals and everything you've done over the season as a team clearly and concisely to the judges.
Do you have any remaining questions, or can we proceed on the next part? All right. Moving on, we got the robot strategy. Robot strategy is very critical when you're at the competition. You want to like go into your qualification matches and your like playoff matches. This is also pretty critical for when you're building your robot. Here we have a game point analysis. This is a pretty important thing when you're constructing your robot strategy and building your robot in general. So this goes over three main variables: easiness, the ease of scoring, the point scorable, and the estimated time to score this. So pretty much you'll look at these like main factors. How easy is it? So like 1 would be the hardest and 3 would be the easiest. You want to see how easy it is to complete a task. Like let's say picking up a sample from the submersible and moving that into the high bucket, or taking a specimen and putting that under the high chamber. You want to see how difficult that is for your robot. Next up, you look at how many points you can score. Let's say you're taking a sample into the high bucket, 8 points, or a specimen under the high chamber, that's 10 points. So you look at that as another variable. Considering the next part, estimated time. How long will it take you to complete this task? Let's say you're looking at the high bucket, scoring samples there. You'll look at like how long that'll take. So let's say it takes like 8 seconds. You'll consider that, and in the end, you'll do a formula called, which is ease times points divided by time. This will give you a score of that task. Typically, you want to go for a lower score for what you want to prioritize, but you also can look at like the happy mediums, like what we did over here in our analysis, like the example one here. Our samples in the high bucket was scored at a 6, but later we didn't realize, after doing a couple more like scoring analysis and looking at the game a little bit more and going over it more, we realized that scoring samples in the high bucket is actually the most robust strategy you can do, because you can do a lot and a lot quicker. So you can score more points and you can do it at a quick rate and it'll make your robot more efficient. But you also, when you're building your robot strategy, you want to consider your teammates in mind. You may not know who you're going to paired up with at qualifiers, but you want to be able to consider that, hey, I want to be an adaptable robot that can be flexible and work with whoever's around me. So you want to build a robot that like can work with other teams, but you also want to consider what like can be effective still. You don't want to overcompensate for your teammates and then make your robot less effective at what you want to do. So mainly look at what your strategy is and prioritize one specific task or multiple. Try and be a little flexible and consider what your robot's capabilities are when you're building it. And consider the robot game point analysis while constructing your robot, because this can help you design your robot around what you want to prioritize during a match. Next up is your gamepad. You're allowed 2 controllers and 2 drivers on the field and 1 driver coach and a human player. When you're building your robot controller, you have around 32 buttons across 2 controllers. So you have a lot of like options available when you're building it. You want to be able to design your robot controller in the most optimal and efficient way possible. You want to be able to divide up tasks between those 2 controllers so you can run parallel actions. What this means is that, like, let's say you're driving your robot around, right, on the field. You want to be able to extend your intake while you're moving your robot, or you want to be able to pick up a sample from the submersible while your robot is still strafing or moving. You also, so like you want to build your robot controller around the fact that you can still do different tasks while you're doing one thing. So you don't want to be able to like have to stop your robot to do the intake process. You want to be able to move around still while you're doing one specific thing. You also have like the fact that you have 2 controllers. You want to split these tasks among these 2 so that, like, let's say you don't want to put too much stress on one controller to have to do all the tasks. You want to be able to split this up to make it a little more easier for both drivers so you can control your robot easier and make it more efficient when driving. You also want to consider possible automated controls whenever you're driving. In like any possible spot where you can have an automated control, you should honestly consider that. That's a very effective thing that we've learned this year. You can automate controls wherever possible. What this means is that, like, let's say like your intake, like when you pick up a sample, you can make it so it's automated so that once it detects there's a sample, they're using a color sensor, it can go to the transfer state. Rather than like a driver having to like initiate the transfer state by pressing a button on the controller, you can have it automated so that it just like detects it and does it itself. Or you can automate other controls like the slides raising on your outtake. Let's say if you have a different like system, what we have is that we click the slide button once, and after that, every time that we get to that state, it'll just keep going back to the previous state. So you don't have to click another button to initialize that. And
Yeah,
other
kind
driver
of Ryan
can continue on that.
And kind of like Ryan was talking about, when he's talking about that one button click, he's saying that as myself who controls the intake, if I click one button as I'm over a sample, it intakes the sample, detects there's a sample in the intake claw, and that automatically transfers. Now, what does that mean? Our intake is on a pair of intake slides. So those slides automatically retract. Our intake arm and wrist go to a transfer position that we set beforehand. And our outtake comes down from whatever position it's in, comes in, picks up that intake sample, and goes up to a predetermined location. And this is all in one button. Now, that might seem a little bit too much, but it's actually it's the way that we automate our robot and become one of the fastest sample intakers. This is a really good way that you guys can minimize your transfer times and your cycle times. So you can score more samples in your match period, right? It's a really nice way that you can, again, get rid of the extra wait time you have where the drivers are pressing more buttons than they need to.
This can also limit driver error when like you click the wrong button on accident and initiate a task you don't want to do, then you have to wait for that to end so you can go to the next step. So having automated controls can also help you limit error, but they can also in some cases cause more error based off of like if you have the transfer. If like it's a wrong pick, then it might transfer automatically based off the color sensors detection. So there is some risk, but overall, automated controls really simplify your robot control and make it really easy for drivers. One more important thing you want to do when you're making your gamepad is to make sure your design and the gamepad, you design your gamepad controls very carefully. You do not want to lock your fingers at all. Like I said before, you want to be able to move your robot around while you're intaking or while you're outtaking. You don't want to have to stop, like you don't want to have to stop like what you're controlling to like do one task. You want to be able to do multiple tasks while at the same time in parallel. So you don't have to stop your robot to slow down your cycle times.
Yeah, and kind of like Ryan was saying, right? A big example of this is in our robot. In our gamepad one, I control the movement of the robot and I control the extension of the intake and picking of a block inside of the submersible, right? What ends up happening is if we want to get that really fast 6 to 7 second transfer time where we intake a block, go drop it in the bucket and come back for another, we don't want to end up doing is I have to let go of the joystick buttons to move the robot and press another button. We don't want to do that at all. We want my thumbs to always be on the joystick and my other fingers pressing the other buttons, right? A really simple way to do this is keep the controls for intaking really simple. So one or two clicks of different buttons. And second, I shouldn't be pressing buttons with my thumbs, right? I shouldn't be having to move to the side by pressing a D-pad up or down or the X, Y, A, B button to intake. I should be pressing buttons like the trigger, which is at the front of the controller, and the bumpers, which is also in the front of the controller. The way we do it is I have 3 controls. That's literally all I have to do. I use the joysticks to move the robot, and I press the right bumper to extend my intake to halfway. I press the left bumper to extend it further, and I press the right bumper again after I extend it to pick up a block. This is a really simple way that I just have to always keep my hands in that same position. I can move the robot and intake at the same time without having to let go of movement.
Right, Next up is your robot strategy for auto and your game strat, and for like teleapp in general. You want to be able to create multiple autonomous paths, right? You don't want to just have one auto path that, like, let's say if your teammate does the same thing, then one of you can't do the same thing. You want to be able to have multiple paths so that you can work with any teammate together. So let's say you want to have a path that goes for the samples and just only goes score samples, takes the spike marks there, places in the bucket, and goes park. You also want to have one that can go for the specimen and can go pick up some specimen, pick up the spike marks, and go place on the specimen. You don't want to interfere with your teammates. You want to be able to have multiple paths so you can like work with any teammate that you get paired up with. Because you never know who you're going to get paired up with at a qualifier for your qualification matches. You want to be able to have multiple auto paths so you can adapt and work flexibly with any of your partners. We also have a software platform called FTC Wires if you're struggling to make a multiple auto paths. We have simple auto paths for your sample side and your specimen side auto, so you can help out with your auto coding process.
And we'll actually get to a separate slide that talks about FTC Wires. It's a resource that we as Hazmat have built and a lot of teams use across the strait and worldwide. If you guys are not familiar with it, again, we'll have a slide about it, and it's a really helpful resource that each of you guys can use to build your auto paths. Kind of like Ryan was saying, the way that we demonstrate in our portfolio, in our software part, that we're flexible and adaptable to other teams. Now, what does this mean? If, for example, a team wants to go to a specific position in auto where you can't control the robot and drop a sample where we're also dropping a sample at the wait time. A simple way we have is that in the selection, in the initialization of our auto, we can choose different wait times. All this means is that we add a simple wait time, which is a variable that we can change
to a specific part in an auto that we can wait for the other robot to reach there and then go there. That's a really easy way to claim that you guys are adaptable in auto. And it's a really simple ad that you guys can do.
An example of this would be like, let's say both of you go to place a preload specimen at the start of the match. You can have a wait time. So like, let's say your teammate goes and they place their specimen first. Then you have like a wait time of like, let's say like 5 seconds, so that your robot doesn't start actually doing its task and putting the specimen on the bar until 5 seconds after the game starts, after your auto is initialized. This is important for working with your partners. And another big thing that you should have at qualifiers is a handout with strategies you can give to your team. Because normally you're gonna talk with like the other teams about like what you're gonna do before a match if you're paired up with them. You should make a little sheet of paper that pretty much says what your auto paths are, what you're capable of on teleop, and what you're planning on doing during matches. This will simplify like the communication process with the other team's drivers, so you can have a swift and adaptable way during a match and be really flexible. Also, make sure you have different strategies for different situations and map out different auto paths for your portfolio.
Right. Thank you, Ryan. So moving on, kind of like we talked about, optimizing your autonomous, right? How can you make your autonomous as fast as it can be so you can get the most amount of points? So the number one thing that we do is we use these things called actions, and specifically parallel actions. What this is that there are action blocks that you can use in your code that allows for actions to run in parallel, right? An example of this is if you're going on the left side in auto and you want to go and drop a block while you're moving your robot. What we do is we raise our outtake slides while our robot is moving to the bucket position. This allows us so that we don't have to get there and then wait to raise our slides. We can do that at the same time using parallel actions. There are two different types of actions. We can go into a little bit more detail, but it's just sequential and parallel. All this is saying is you can either run stuff right after each other or run stuff in the same time that is happening. And that's a really big way you can cut down time, right? Instead of moving your robot and then extending your intake, or moving your robot and then dropping, you can drop while you're moving your robot. Second thing, kind of like we talked about, trajectories. These are objects that you can build in your code that you can put inside of actions. And these are simple trajectories that you can use to kind of optimize your auto. What this means is you can either strafe or use a function called a spline. That's the most efficient way your robot can move to a position. Now, this might be you can set the position or the heading your robot wants to end up at and the angle you want to come in to a specific position. This is kind of the more advanced stuff, but this is where you can get into finding the fastest time your robot can get from one place to another. If you guys have any questions on how to implement these, please don't hesitate to reach out to us right after this event. Okay.
All right, so moving on from software, we're going to cover some. Oh, sorry. My name is Faraj. I'm a mechanical member on Team Hazmat, and this is my 4th year in FTC. So moving on from software, we're going to cover some mechanical stuff. So one thing we do after every qualifier is our acronym called ROBOT. It's really easy to remember, and it stands for retrospective, optimize, build, operate, and test. So after every qualifier, we kind of sit together and we retrospect on what we did during that qualifier, what went well, what didn't go as well, how we can improve, this feedback we got from the judges, specifically for mechanical, like if anything broke or anything like that. So we kind of sit together and discuss each of these things, and we evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of our robot. After this, we optimize. So we kind of plan out what we're going to do using all these things that we discussed. So let's say one example for us is after our first qualifier, our intake broke a couple of times during that qualifier. So during the optimized state, we figured out that the intake was the problem, and we kind of modeled a better intake that wouldn't break as much. So that's kind of what we do during the optimized state. After optimize is build. Build is where we take all of the ideas that we discussed during this optimized stage and we put them into action. These can be prototypes or they can be the final build. It doesn't matter, and it can take as long as you need to kind of get from prototype to prototype until you've reached your final state. After this build state comes operate. So once we have all of our new parts on the robot, we need to test it.
So we put them on the robot and we start the initial coding process with these new parts and just see how they work. We practice a lot and we verify that the robot works consistently and it's accurate and everything that we added works to the way that we want it to. And finally, it's test. So one thing that we realized this season is that we needed a lot of heavy testing to make sure that our robot works. Initially, we used to just test kind of game scenarios that we thought would occur, and the robot worked well. But in competitions, you won't always have ideal conditions. There's going to be lots of different conditions that you're going to be put in that you maybe wouldn't have practiced. So during this test phase, we focus on heavy testing to make sure that our robot can accurately, or to make sure our robot doesn't break down and to make sure it's accurate in almost every condition. So that's the acronym that we use, ROBOT, which stands for Retrospect, Optimize, Build, Operate, and Test. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask after this section.
Hi everyone, I'm Daniel. I'm the mechanical lead, and this is my 4th year in FTC. So now we're going to talk about robot preparation. What can you do to prepare for your qualifier? So the first thing we want to talk about is spares. Spares are just spare parts of important subsystems. So we have an intake and outtake claw, and we have an intake spare and an outtake spare. And we also have a lot of spares for our intake because during both our first and our second qualifier, our intake broke a lot. Like our claw bits broke, as you can see from this picture right here. So we specifically printed multiple claw bits and we made an entire intake subsystem so that we could quickly and easily replace it in case it broke. And then next is robot inspection. So robot inspection is completely necessary to actually compete. So the checklist that they use to check your robot is online. You can just use that and you can run kind of a demo of a robot inspection to make sure that everything's working all right. And you can also, something that our team does is we create an inspection op mode, which fully extends your robot. So a new rule this year, as you all know, is the robot has a max 42 by 20 inch extension limit. So our robot, we just create an inspection mode where when we start our program, our robot fully extends to its max capability so that the robot inspectors have a much easier time of just testing if it actually fits in the extension limit. Another thing we do for our qualifiers is unique fabrication. We 3D print parts. We get parts custom cut from aluminum. This gives us better efficiency and speed because our parts are custom made for us. We can, instead of using a bunch of a bought part, we can use one of a fabricated part. It increases our speed. It reduces the weight of the robot because it's a lot lighter than the parts we usually buy. And on our first iteration, we had a lot of parts on our robot that later became fabricated in our second iteration. Another thing that goes with our spares is to practice repairs. And one thing that's really important is mechanical team. You guys should have at least 1 or 2 people always set on servicing the robot, like giving it ESD, tightening screws, making sure everything is working full capability in between our matches. So I would recommend maybe carrying around a few tools and just always following the robot around and making sure it's in perfect condition. And then drivers. You want to break the robot, as weird as it seems. You want to consistently drive it so parts get used to the point where they would be in a qualifier so that we can see what will break in a qualifier and we can build around that. So as we saw, our intake kept breaking a lot during our qualifier and sometimes outside. So we strengthen our claw by adding more material around the weak points where it usually would break. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Caleb. I'm on the mechanical team, and this is my second year. So first, CAD stands for computer-aided design. It's used basically to plan out. You can use it to plan out your robot and create to sketch out like early prototypes and then improve it. Some platforms that people use are Onshape and Fusion, which are both free to students. We use it to design our different systems and to see how they work with each other and make sure they can all actually work on the same robot. We can also use it to find properties of our robot, such as the center of gravity of our robot and the weight, which we use to climb. Another example of this is we did a stress analysis on our hooks, which let us see if our hooks could actually hold our robot weight and successfully do our climb.
Hi again, everybody. My name is Jake. I'm on the software team. This is my third year in FTC. I want to talk about logs and kind of just documentation. Logs are a good way of recording kind of what you've gone through in the season. This is going to serve as like a summary of everything that you've done and show the judges the journey of, your team and the season. And as you can see here, we have just kind of like sentences, words of just kind of summarizing what went on in a specific meeting. And then we have pictures as well. We assign one person to manage the logs. This doesn't mean that like it's one person doing all of them. It's one person making sure that they get done. So the entire sub team should be doing their logs. And you can get all the perspectives as well, because it's usually different people working on different things. And you should be making sure you note all the participants, what went on, challenges that you faced, as well as how you overcame them, and pictures as well. You should always have a plan for what you're going to be doing the next meeting, and just kind of have a reflection as well.
So yeah, logs are actually a really easy way that your team can keep track, first of all, what's been done, and show that you guys are consistently working on and improving your robot. Logs are something that we put inside of our engineering notebook, specifically our software engineering notebook. And it's useful for all sub teams. You can definitely find ways, and there are always stuff that you can put inside of your logs every single day for all the different sub teams and the work they've accomplished that day.
So another big point of documentation is documenting your iterations in your logs and, as Benai said, in your engineering notebook. So iterations, they're previous forms of a subsystem that has now changed. And if presented well, just like logs, they can show how you learned and improved your robot and its components. And again, it shows a good representation of the design process. It shows that you're following your design process, which we talked about earlier. So now we're going to go on to how to show iterations. So you want to take pictures of each different form your subsystem goes through, and then either put these in your portfolio or maybe even in your engineering notebook. You want to show how you made these changes, what the changes are, and then the most important is why you made these changes. So as we've said, like right here, you can see our 3D printed outtake plates, they broke off during our drive practice, and they broke at a weak point. So we created aluminum plates with a lot less weak points. They're stronger material and they have less weak points. So they haven't broken yet. They're really good. And it shows we documented this. So we showed how we improved from 3D prints to aluminum and how we improved our design. And when you're going around documenting these iterations, you want to include sketches, CAD drawings. This is more like how and why you went about these iterations. And again, our intake kept breaking because it would get caught on the submersible. So we made our repair easier by adjusting our CAD for better serviceability. And we increased the material on our claws, which is the main thing that broke, so that our claws would break a lot less. Now we're going to have the alumni answer questions.
Are there any questions you guys have on what we just got over on robot strategy and optimization? Oh, so there's something in the chat. Thank you, Trent, for a useful resource in the chat. Are there any other questions that teams have here? Yeah. That's a really good question. So, well, we had 3 meetings every week. It speeds up towards a qualifier where we end up meeting a lot more often, but usually during the season, we have meetings on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Our Tuesdays meeting go from 5:30 to 8:30, sometimes stretching forward again, depending on how close we are to a qualifier. Our Thursday meetings are the same times, and our Saturday meetings are in the morning from 9 to around 12:30. Adding all that up, I think business has an estimate. Well, anyhow, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to qualifiers. It's closer to
Yeah, and other than team meetings, we also have volunteering events that our team are part of frequently. So this also includes hours, usually ranging from 1 to 2 hours per event. And we count that as each team member attending the volunteering event. So that adds to our total hours as a team per week.
Yeah, it's good to keep track.
If you guys could repeat questions from like the in-person session so the virtual can also hear it, that'd be great.
Sorry. So that question was, how does your team keep track of hours, or how many hours does your team put in per week? How many
I was
hours?
just gonna say that we have a spreadsheet of like how many hours, we just like keep track of our hours for outreach too. So each member will have like a slot and then we'll say like, we went to this outreach event and then we can just do like the calculations in that Excel sheet. So then we have like an easy way to have a number that we can even tell like judges, because then it's a good representation of how much we're putting in. So I suggest that's a good idea.
Okay. There's a question in the chat on how should we decide what implementations are worth the cost and time?
That would probably go back to the analysis matrix that we performed at the beginning of the season to really see what we focus on and what tasks are the most important. You can keep doing that over and over throughout the season to evaluate what's going to earn you the most points in the game, or what's going to have the most impact on your robot to show a wow factor for presentations. But yeah, that kind of more depends on your own personal robot and what you really want to focus on.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
The follow-up to that question was asking this because a new implementation would not be very predictable with competitions coming up quickly. I guess my question, the question you should ask yourself then is, are you prepared to have enough time to both design and then implement and then test? That's the big thing. You don't really want to run up to a competition without having tested your robot design. So I guess it all depends on how much time you have to work on it. If you're confident that you can set aside a good number of cycles, like a couple hours at least, um, for testing that new system. And is there a way you could do that system without compromising the function of your old system so that if it ends up not working, you can revert back very quickly? I guess those would be the biggest things for me to think about. Yeah, we've made tons of changes in the middle of the season, but it's about scheduling your time effectively so you're able to get it done while still maintaining a level of quality and knowing that it's been tested and that it will work.
And at the core of that question, it's asking like yourself whether you actually need to make that change or not. Like Varun mentioned, you need to make sure your robot functions as per your kind of game strategy plan or analysis so that it does the tasks that you have planned for. And moreover on the design part, if your design doesn't work as efficiently as you think it does, you have to ask yourself whether it's a design problem or it's more of workarounds of that particular design. For example, if say our outtake slides were really slow, right? It wouldn't be a question of whether we need to replace the whole slide subsystem because it's more associated to like say just the motor that we run the slides with. So it's just a matter of changing out the motor as opposed to the whole subsystem. And so what I'm getting at is you have to assess whether it's truly the whole design's problem or whether you can, make it work just as intended. But it's just a matter of minor tweaks or, just a software thing. And if not, then yeah, you like Trent mentioned, you have to find the time to, fully design, prototype, build, iterate a new design that does work to your planned functions.
Yeah, and adding on to Aman, actually, we had a big example of this going on currently. So we have a qualifier upcoming this weekend. And we've been deciding, going back and forth, whether we should implement a third stage climb where we'll be climbing onto the final rung and scoring that extra points,
versus making our outtake faster and kind of sacrificing that third stage climb, right? Those are one of the questions that include how you want to go back and forth and determine which of these options should you choose. So we are choosing to go with what we have right now because we decided that compared to the last qualifier, we had an advantage of a climb versus another team, but that other team had faster outtake slides. What ended up happening was we won by a 1 point differential, all because we could climb to the second stage and they couldn't. Although they could score more samples because their outtake slides were faster, we could climb, and that gave us that extra points that could beat them.
Also, for iterations, it's important to identify a goal or a specific measurable progress. For example, I know we've done cycle times before. If you get really out of control, if you're just making a lot of iterations, just trying different things over and over, it's important to make an iteration, measure how it's different from the last one, and try to see if you're making progress to see if you want to keep going through with that iteration or go a different direction.
Yeah, and it's always important to measure your success, right? You always want to be thinking about rather than just making iterations just to show that you have, you want to think about how these iterations can be helpful and actually help you improve. All right. Moving on. Okay, sorry.
So it's really, really important to practice. Like to the point where like for a lot of like the last 4 years before I was off the team, I would be taking the mechanical and coding team to have the robot ready for me to like drive because like for me driving, like I really need to practice it. And I think everyone should, whoever's the driver, because those like tight situations when you have like 15 seconds left, 30 seconds left, those are the times that change, especially in a win-loss like scenario. Like one win, one loss changes a whole lot. I'm sure as all of you guys know. So really making sure that those like tight scenarios are well rehearsed and like the more you're familiar with your robot, the easier those situations like are like you're able to deal with. So really like if you're a driver, like really push like your mechanical, your software team to have a robot ready for you to practice with. And that's another thing that balance with like iterations. Like yes, you want to iterate, but a week before your qualifier, you shouldn't be iterating. You should be practicing, grinding in, and making sure that all the parts on your robot that are current are working. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's really that balance between whether you want to make a change that you believe can help you, or you want to keep going and practice with what you have to succeed. All right, moving on. This is our FTC Wise resource page. Jake can talk a little bit about that.
FTC Wires stands for Wisconsin Rises to Enable STEM Growth. It's an initiative that we started back in the 2021-2022 season, and it aims to grow the amount of FTC teams in Wisconsin, both as well as, in the US and also internationally as well. Our goal, 100 teams in Wisconsin. We're at 90 right now, guys, so we're close. But we have a software platform on FTC Wires, and what we have there is a base autonomous path that then teams can integrate into their software and then build onto it and customize it to their needs, their goals as well. We have business resources. So we have templates for our engineering portfolio, engineering notebook. We have sponsorship help, and as well as mentors, connections, just kind of helping rookie teams get off the ground, and kind of resources with whatever you guys might need. We have as well as links to contact us, and whether or not, like, if you guys ever want to add something or have a nice resource, contact us, we'll add it in. This is a platform for collaboration, so we want to just have as much as you guys can help us as well as us can help you. Thank you.
And the way you can actually get to the site is it's a simple link, ftcwires.com. If you search it up, it's going to be the first website that you can see. It's a Wix website, ftcwires.com, and that's the resource page where you can find all the resources you need. It's really helpful for teams that want to build their own autonomous, and we have options for block coding where teams can implement simple trajectories using block coding. All right.
Yeah, so we're going to go a little bit into the conclusion of our workshops today. So first, I just want to summarize what we did today. So we went into detail about the different parts of your qualifiers and how you can be successful. So we talked about programming, mechanical business, and what you should talk about in judging, how to build your portfolio for each of those sections. And also we shared a lot about the awards and how you can align your portfolio with each award.
And then for just a little bit of a summary about what you learned, you should have learned about how you can improve your current portfolio and judging to demonstrate all of the work that your team has put in this season. So for game strategy, just a reminder, make sure that your judges are really prepared, or your drivers are prepared. Okay. And then some robot building tips and ideas, and then just team impact, how to best summarize how your team has spread STEM across communities. And just a reminder, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, or if you're staying, come up to any one of us and we should be able to help you with anything if you have any questions. Okay, so we wanted to thank everyone for being here in person and over Zoom. And we hope that this entire workshop was very helpful. And like Annalise said, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us on Instagram, like any social media, and we also have our email. We've sent like invites to. So you can reach out to us there. And we'd also so the next steps after this session is for you guys to plan out what you can do with your portfolio, your presentations, and your robot to improve it for your next qualifiers, or if you're going to state or for the competition, to improve all of your different aspects for that. And then work on putting together all the plan changes you have and presenting them well in judging. As we said earlier, your judging session is really capturing everything that you've done over the season, and you want to be able to show the improvements and the iterations you've made in the best way so that the judges can really see that.
Yeah, so once again, we're going to be sending out this slideshow with all the information you need to you guys in an email. So don't hesitate if you guys lost some information or want to reach out. We're going to be sending this out. Yeah.
One more thing. So if you guys like make any changes to your script or your portfolios and you want feedback, we're happy to help you with that. You can schedule a meeting with us. You can just like email or reach out to us on Instagram, and we can give you feedback. Or if people are interested, we also would love to host more workshops like this. And if you have any feedback on this workshop, things we could have talked about, we'd love to know that too.
Yes. I'm just gonna talk. Okay, I was just gonna talk more about wires. So first, yeah. So for our software platform, as you said, again, it has both Java-based program and block-based program with Roadrunner installed for Java. Also, on our business side, we have lots of things of outreach and many ideas. Oh, here, let me just. Okay, so in wires, when you go to the website, if you are a new team or just haven't filled this out, if you could fill this form. So it's gonna have team contact page, so we can have team number, team name, coach, Instagram, all these things. So then we're able to contact you, and that's just gonna make it a lot easier for us and you guys to help learn together and grow together.
And also, is one of the tabs is team information. So the like contact information for teams isn't just for us. If you guys ever want to host your own outreach events or collaborate with other teams, yeah, so teams. There's this sheet that has information on most of the teams in your state. Again, if they're newer working teams, we might not have it yet. So if your information isn't in here, please make sure to add that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'd just like to thank all the teams here today with us in person and virtually for coming in and attending. Yeah, we hope you guys found this workshop informational and you guys can succeed off of this.
Just want to thank our alumni for coming here and sharing their stories.
All the alumni who joined us virtually and in person.
Yeah. We really appreciate you taking your time to be here and help mentor these teams. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you guys.
I'm actually gonna go ahead and drop the link to the presentation in the chat for all the virtual teams right now. And again, we'll send it out in an email to all the teams.
Actually, yes. First, we're